Aloha, namaste. This is Radha Home, and I'm here with our new moon forecast for Tuesday, March 21st. It's going to be at 7:22 a.m. Hawaii time, and it's happening in the star of Uttarabhadrapada. This is the later blessed step. It's right in the middle of Pisces, and it's where we are walking through that door. If you've seen some of the recent things I've written on Purva Bhadrapada, it's the other pair of the star. Purva is earlier, Uttara is later, or sometimes like higher is another translation. And Bhadra is blessed, and Pada is step. So in Purva Bhadrapada, we have this awakening that we are beyond our bodies, that we are beyond this, mundane existence that we're living in. In Uttara Bhadrapada, we walk through the door or dive into the ocean. This is a star where we actually do the work of that awakening. So if you've ever had such a moment, whether it's from a ceremonious experience or from plant medicine or just a spontaneous moment of awakening, you know that those moments happen, but they don't take you all the way to enlightenment, right? You're not suddenly everything in your life is better. You have to come back into the real world and you have to integrate that into your life. Purva Bhadrapada is ruled over by Jupiter, where we're all about the expansion, the wisdom, the ideas. And Uttara Bhadrapada is ruled by Saturn. And so this is where we really allow ourselves to face some of the harsher realities, the harsher truths. Uttara Bhadrapada is ruled by Ahirbudnya, and Ahirbudnya is the serpent of the deep. He's one of the 11 Rudras, and he's a dragon, essentially. And so he requires that we go really deep down into those watery emotions of Pisces and dredge up some poison before the Amrita, before the nectar arrives. And sometimes in doing that, we get stuck or we get lost or we swim to the surface and we cut out and we say, okay, that wasn't for us. It was a little too much. And we have to dive down again and again and again. Anyone who's on a searching path and trying to move closer to truth in this lifetime knows that. It's not just like, oh, bang, I had this realization and there I am. It's like, okay, again and again and again, we have awakening. And again and again and again, we have to face things that we might not be prepared to face. And we have to show up for all that pain. We have to show up for all those emotions. We have to show up for whatever is difficult. And maybe we pass through it that time. Maybe we don't. Maybe we, fall back on old habits and routines and safety mechanisms we used in order to keep ourselves safe at earlier points in our life. Most of them are learned from childhood and they're stored in our subconscious. So when we think about the kingdom of the Naga, the serpent kingdom, which Ahirbudnya would fit into, even though it's technically a water dragon, it's actually a serpent. It's a serpent of the deep. And this Naga kingdom, this world of snakes, essentially, is the underworld. And in the mythology, it's the underworld. In the translation to our lives, it's our subconscious. And even if you don't know too much about psychology, you might know that most of us before the age of 3 don't have strong recollection of specific events or specific memories. And the reason is because we don't have our mind is not thinking in logical sequences at that time. So whatever happens to us when we're young is being stored and impressioned in our body and in our subconscious. But we don't necessarily have the words or the understanding to explain it. Maybe somebody told us what happened, or maybe you're a rare person who remembers specific details of an event prior to being 3. But most of us just have those early memories stored in our body and in our subconscious. And this is why a lot of the healing work that people do has to be somatic. It has to be of the body because it is stored there. And you can't talk it out with somebody if you don't even comprehend it or understand it or remember it. And so when we talk about going into the Naga kingdom, when we talk about serpentine energy and poison and Amrita and all these sort of, phrases and words that can paint a picture, we need to understand that it's also pointing to the part of us that is unaware of our wounds, of our triggers, of our traumas, and of ways we act that come from that are so ingrained in us that we actually might not even recognize they're happening. Right? It might require another person to point that out to us, or it might require a sudden release coming through some kind of activity like a somatic therapy or, a hypnotherapy or EMDR or, a plant medicine, whatever form of, or practice that you take on in order to release these things. It sometimes requires that coming out for us to even know it was there, for us to even know that it existed at all. And this is the real work, right? There's shadows on the path. It's not a clean and happy sunlit path where everything is just roses, right? So this nakshatra in Pisces is very peaceful in many ways because it is in Pisces and there's this watery, stable energy, but there's also this energy of really needing to face things. And those things are often harsh or sad or can bring up feelings and emotions and memories for us that we might consider unpleasant. So this is part of the path and part of the work. And it's necessary to go through this before we can get to that final nakshatra, Revati, where we walk each other home, where we have the skills to even be above the water and walking each other home. I'm going to share my screen so we can see the chart of this new moon. It's definitely not alone. Our sun and our moon are joined with Jupiter and Mercury in this new moon. We have, and actually even at the exact moment of the new moon, the ascendant is there as well. So it's all about this, Piscean energy and this really like evolution of the self, right? When we see the ruling planet in the first, and this would be like a muhurta timing, like an event timing, like the event is the moment of the new moon, the moment the sun and moon are coming together in exact degrees. And in that time, the ruling planet Jupiter is right there on the first. So the event itself is about the self. And it's also about the event of it because it's the 10th house as well, which has to do with, with the career. But in a case of an event, it's like the manifestation of said event, the unrolling of it in the public eye, if you will. So we have Jupiter, Mercury, and the sun and moon all here together. And Mercury is in its state of debility here. So it's in a place in the sky where we have the least capacity to communicate. We're the most sort of murky and watery in our communication. We might use slang or exaggerate or just misspeak. We might sort of, generalize something as opposed to saying specific details. It's across from Virgo, where we're very detail oriented and where Mercury is exalted in his own sign. And so we have this capacity to maybe really erase some of the lines that we have around our ideas and our thoughts when Mercury is in Pisces, but it doesn't translate well to communication. And it doesn't even really translate well to understanding, because unless you have a very specific type of mind that can really grasp all these spiritual concepts at once, more often than not, when it comes in that overload of everything is everything and nothing is nothing and it's all the same, it can get so confusing that we don't actually know what we're saying at all. And this happens a lot in sort of new age communities, or when you're having spiritual conversations with people that have lots of different lineages and lots of different things they're interested in. They're sort of like, cherry picking what feels good to them. they often can't explain anything that they know. They don't understand why they know anything, except for they heard it over here and they heard this over here, and it seems to make sense to them. And people will say things like, well, this feels right to me, right? This feels right to me, or this really resonates. And that's great. It's really important part of walking the path is being able to tune into our body and tune into our, the feelings as they arise in a physical manner within our being. But it's also important to recognize where our gauge is, what our barometer is. Are we able to even measure what feels good to us? Are we able to measure truth against anything? If somebody's, eating junk food every day, they might not feel that sick if they eat it again, because to them that their body's used to that. They're used to consuming food that's not healthy. So when they eat healthy food, it might even not feel good. Like, ugh, what is this salad doing to my body? But it doesn't mean the salad is not good and the junk food is right? It just means that they're used to something feeling good that doesn't feel good. Excuse me, that's not, there's a Piscean Mercury moment. They're used to something feeling good that isn't actually good for them, or that isn't actually healthy. Well, it's the same idea with any of these spiritual concepts or beliefs that we might have. You may have built up such a resonance with something that's not true that it feels true. And that can be true for any kind of belief, not necessarily a spiritual or religious one. It can be true for anything that we believe about the world, socially, politically, or otherwise. So likewise, when somebody is experiencing a trigger or a trauma response to something, they might feel the most, right or safe in establishing that boundary or in whatever it is they're saying or doing. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the healthiest way to feel. Or we might be attracted to people that bring up childhood wounds, or that remind us of our caregivers, or remind us of somebody that was not a healthy relationship for us. And it feels better, or it feels good to us more than a healthy relationship might feel, or more than somebody who's engaging with us and relating with us in a healthy way. So this work that we're doing in Uttarabhadrapada has a lot to do with really establishing discernment around what is and is not truth. And it can be very difficult to do that with Mercury, right? The actual capacity of discernment is the other side of communication. We don't just say things, we have to let them in and put them somewhere in our head in order to repeat them out again. And so we might have a lack of organization, a lack of discernment, sort of wide open doors where it's like anything is possible and everything is possible, but we're not able to grab onto any specific things that are possible. Or everything is good in its own way, even the bad things. So let's fold it all into one big mush pile and not, categorize or organize anything. And these are really big blind spots for a lot of people in the spiritual community. So it's important to understand what we don't understand, right? What we don't actually understand, or that if something was taken in a different context, it might look really different. And this joining with Jupiter here can help offer us not more discernment per se, but really allowing our higher wisdom and our capacity to tune into that channel of what wisdom, what information, what path, what teachers, what teachings, what practices are really holding truth that will sustain the test of time. And those can be an anchor of sorts in the midst of some of our confusion and murkiness. And so this is something, it's called Nicha Bhanga, when there's a debilitated planet like Mercury is joined with the ruler, who's in very positive dignity, obviously in his own sign. He's very intelligent in his own sign, Jupiter. So we are able to access really high sustaining truths with Jupiter and Pisces. We do have trouble with discernment of details and information and facts and more like basic knowledge, not this high wisdom. So this whole cycle, this next month, is going to have this bent to it. It's going to have this sort of dreamy Piscean quality, but also this yearning for higher wisdom, higher knowledge, and discernment that is at times a little murky. And we're going to almost have to rely on our intuition or rely on our capacity for our teachings and teachers to be feeding us good information, to be feeding us good, solid knowledge and facts and details. Now, Mercury's been here for a while, and Jupiter as well, and Mercury's going to be moving out before the end of next week. So we won't have that same style of communication the entire time, but whatever's set at the new moon time, whatever's set at that event moment of the new moon, the new cycle, permeates throughout the entire month, even as we move into the full moon, which is showing us the opposite energy where the moon is. So we can also see here, we have Venus just passing Rahu. So last week they were joined really tightly. Now she's starting to move past. So a lot of the illusions and suspicions and quality of really exaggerating our romantic relationships and our sense of happiness is going to start to dissolve as this week goes forward. We're going to start to see ourselves coming more into a clear vision with our relationships and what makes us happy, what brings us joy. But it's still in Aries. So there's still this quality of being very self-centric in our relationships and in our relating. Like it's all about what I'm experiencing, and other people can almost become like tools or something to be dismissed while we go towards our own happiness, while we seek our own pleasure. And so this is something to be aware of, particularly if you're in relationship, because both parties are always doing these things. When something's a transit, everybody's experiencing it. So, you're feeling more selfish, and it's not just like, okay, I'm feeling more selfish, maybe my partner will be more accommodating. It's like we're both feeling that way. And people who have a bent towards this, like maybe have a lot of planets in Aries or already have their Venus in a fire sign or something like that, it might feel kind of natural and just like what they're always doing. Whereas somebody who maybe is more accommodating in their normal life might be feeling a rush of desire to be selfish, and they might notice more how someone else is being selfish. So this can create a lot of arguments, considering our communication planet is in this sort of murky land where we're not as able to clearly communicate. So one of the things we really need to do is force some discipline around our communication. And this can come with Mars here in Mercury sign of Gemini, because this is adding yet another element to our relational situation. So we have murky communication, we have self-centric sense of relationships and path towards happiness, and still very close to the node. So there's still this obsessive quality and this sort of confusion and delusion and suspicion that comes with Rahu. And then we also have Mars in Gemini, where we can become very logical all of a sudden. Gemini is where we're very flexible and open to ideas. Our discernment is not as wide open as with Pisces, where anything goes, but we're like, oh, that's an interesting idea. Tell me more about that idea, and hear out a whole perspective of someone else that maybe does shift your opinion a little, or maybe it doesn't, but you're willing to hear out different people. There's not an emotional reactivity. There's more of a quality with Gemini where we just have this stream of constant facts, ideas, and maybe we take down some of them and sort of put them over here and some over here. But it takes us time to discern right and wrong, usually, with Gemini's energy. And when Mars is there, we take a lot less time to decide right and wrong. All of a sudden, we're not so accommodating, and we're not like, oh, please tell me about your side of things, and let me, see how that lands with my side of things. We're more like, this is like this is right, this is wrong, this is black, this is white. You're wrong, I'm right. And we can become very argumentative this way, and also very staunch in our opinions and competitive. So one of the ways to work with this energy is to allow yourself the mental gymnastics. So perhaps that's, playing puzzles or some other kind of mental exercises or games that help you work out that energy, and even have maybe a little competition involved so that you can get that out as well. Another thing to do is to really work with disciplining your communication. Mars is the planet of discipline. It's our courage, it's our action, it's our fire. When we're not properly channeling the energy, it becomes anger. So if Mars doesn't have usually physical activity to engage itself, we end up being angry. So Mars in Gemini is not going to be very physical, right? We're not going to be running marathons and exercising unless we already do that, unless we already have a lot of discipline in our lives. What it's going to be capable of doing, though, is really focusing that energy and that fire and that sense of right and wrong on ourselves, which is where Mars's energy is best directed anyway, and try to tighten up our communication. When we go through moments of fire, when we're triggered with our trauma response, when we feel like, blah, I just need to explode on someone, maybe we can take a moment and wait. We can hold back, and we can find forms of communication that resonate with us, whether that's, nonviolent communication, whether that's a more polarized kind of communication, or whether that's any other form of compassionate communication. It gives us an opportunity to shift just a few words or just a few ways of saying something so that it goes from arguing to relating. And it might be awkward because you're having to force yourself to say words that don't come naturally and just flow out of you, like all those, all those angry words or all those swear words or all those confusing, attaching, clinging words that we use that are so impassioned and that feel like truth. But going back to the earlier discussion, is that really truth, or is that actually learned behavior that's been ingrained in us for so long that feels natural and organic, but it's actually coming from maybe your parents or even your grandparents who taught it to your parents, or just society at large in some random slang. I mean, every now and then, if you stop and listen to some phrases you might have, it's like, what does that even mean? Where did that come from? You learned it somewhere, right? And just like you learned all those casual ways of talking that make you seem so real, you can also learn conscious ways of talking that actually really communicate your feelings, your experiences, your desires, and your needs to other people. And we can also learn ways of active listening and hearing and receiving people's truths without taking it personally. These are really deep practices, actually. Communication practices are probably one of the most important things we can do if we hope to have positive relationships with people. A lot of times we get caught up in the romanticism of speech and the romanticism of, particularly our emotional speech, the way in which we can paint a picture of our emotions. Or we get really high and mighty on our horse and something like this Mars and Gemini, and we just want to eviscerate somebody or really land our point and win our argument. But if we do care to be happy after this moment has passed, and after the moment of winning has passed, then in the long term, really being more conscious about our communication is going to go a long way. So a beautiful time to discipline yourself around your words and your communication. There's one more thing I wanted to say about this Rahu Venus. We have Saturn giving a one-way drishti, a one-way gaze to our Rahu Venus. And this is really interesting because Rahu does create this illusory world. There's an anxiousness where Rahu is because we're creating new energy. So there can be a lot of stops and starts. If you're not in a relationship, you might find yourself sort of stopping and starting with new relationships or new interests, at least. Almost a frenetic frenzy can occur with Rahu. It's like the big open mouth, just taking things in, but not really assimilating any of it. And then Saturn gives his drishti, his gaze, and is like holding you to reality. One of Saturn's best blessings and gifts is this just realness that lacks our feelings and emotions, the realness beyond even the feelings, where it's like, we're all going to die. And, all the spiritual tenets in the world and all the high philosophies and all the ways of relating and all the modes of communication won't do anything for you. when you're on your deathbed, or when you're, watching your loved one go to the end. So there's this quality with Saturn that's incredibly humbling, because it shows us that even all the things and all the efforts we're putting in to become better people or closer to truth are kind of nothing, because in the end, it's all just nothing, right? It's this like dust to dust kind of feeling. And that cold, harsh gaze on the Rahuvian, not sure that's a word, but I'm going to use it. The Rahuvian illusions of what makes us happy and how I can be happy if I do this, and what that person's doing is not making me happy, and this sort of exaggerated mirage of things, particularly when joined Venus, where there is already a lot of illusion around happiness. There's already so much we're sold about what will make us happy and what relationships are supposed to be like and what beauty is. Venus is also about beauty. That the Saturn gaze can really pull us down to earth and remind us of what's more true and what's more real, and things like commitment and hard work and humility, and how in the end it's not about the beautiful model in the picture that you want. It's like, can you sit by the deathbed with this person? Can you love someone so much that you can sit by their deathbed and usher them through that final portal to their death in the most selfless way possible, right? That kind of love. So Saturn's bringing that energy to the picture as well, and reminding us of the practical needs in our happiness, that if we just go after what's sort of frivolous and fun, or what we think will give us pleasure and we think will give us happiness, we might end up really disappointed in the end. So he's that cold, hard gaze. But he also brings a level of fear, right? Saturn is fear in many ways. He's fear of time running out, fear of not having enough time, fear of death, fear of loss, all of those things. But he's fear, and he's fear from real things that actually will happen. Rahu is fear that's this anxiousness because he doesn't know what he's doing, and it's kind of just, this otherworldly impulse we have with Rahu, these messages we're getting and we're going this way and that way, but we don't feel confident, we feel anxious. So the mixture of the two of them, Saturn putting that gaze there, can definitely bring a lot of like fear and uncertainty, particularly in the realm of relating, or what makes you happy, or whatever house Venus rules for you. So that's really important part of everything, and I talk about it often. That's why I do weekly reports, really based on the rising sign, because the rising sign is your physical presence in this world, and it's what happens to you. Even the moon as a point of contact for yourself is much more about your psychology and what it's going to feel like. The rising sign and the houses from the rising sign and what those planets rule, that's what's happening in your life. That's why when we do readings, we can say this is actually what's going to happen. You might move in the next month, or you might break up, or this career opportunity is going to come. It's because it's specific to what's actually happening to your physical form, your body, and the karma, the actions you're taking now that will provide the options you have in the future based on what your choices are. So what Venus rules for you is going to make a huge difference as to where this is located in your chart, what it's bringing up for you, and what you're actually obsessing over, where Rahu's gaze is really exaggerating. And the area of the life that is Aries, Rahu's been there since last March. So you've had a full year of obsessing over this area, and now Venus has entered the picture, and what does she rule for you? So all of these things are super important. That's why I do the kind of breakdown reports I do. And if you're not on my email list, you can go to www.radhahomeyoga.com and get on it. And you'll get a couple free reports right off the bat, breaking down Saturn and Aquarius for all 12 signs. I still have the 2023 forecast running. And soon enough, we'll do a new one for Jupiter when he moves into Aries himself on April 21st. So I hope this is helpful for you. I hope you have a blessed new moon, and I will see you again real soon. Namaste.